in your development strategy, we know we have EDPRS. Rwanda has a medium-term strategy called EDPRS and has the Vision 2020. How has health sector been prioritized among other priorities that the economy is having? Over to you.
Thank you, Ronald. Morning, everyone. I'm happy to be part of this morning discussion. First and foremost, the health sector is one of the key components of the EDPRS, of the government strategic plan. It's one of the foundation issues, actually one of the key ones. Health and education are the big components that actually are supposed to be the drivers of change that support other components of economic development. And health has been looked at in a way that government looks at the financing, of course, having a mix of the donors and government. And the way EDPRS is built, you look at the drivers of the economic development, and health being one of the key drivers, it's been given a priority in terms of funds allocation for the current years and future years. When you look at EDPRS projections, it's above 10% allocation overall budget year after year, and that is a mix of the both foreign and domestic financing. And EDPRS projected reduction of donor financing in general across all sectors, health inclusive. Therefore, that projected means that we look at the increase in our domestic resources and how that increase should be distributed across sectors. And health is given priority. I was looking at numbers like 2 years ago. The allocation of health from the domestic budgets about from 2008, between 2008 and 2015-16, you when you look at the domestic allocation, it has doubled.
How is it going to contribute in fostering that economic growth if you invested in the health sector right now? What will be the contribution in your own perspectives to foster Rwanda to be a middle-income country by 2020?
Of course, being a middle-income country, first and foremost, needs having healthy people, well-educated people, and healthy people. And the Ministry of Health contributes in a way. We've got to increase investments in infrastructure, investment in capacity of the people, for them to be able to support the population that will be actually needing better health services compared to maybe the way it was in the past 10 or 8 years. So that requires us to invest in capacity building for the personnel, invest in infrastructure, and that, when you look at the financing of the health sector, let's say for the past years and the coming, let's say, about 3 years, do you see a big increase in the recurrent expenditures? That goes to the personnel of the health facilities across the country. We've had massive constructions through the Ministry of Health, of the health centers, hospitals, and the like. That requires investment in people, requires investment in equipment, requires investment in medicine, because as you come to the middle-income country, people will demand different services, differentiated services. People will need more care compared to the way in the past. So that requires huge investment, but that to be done, private sector is going to come on board in terms of, because people have enough money to spend, therefore private sector has got to come in and be able to actually profit from the capacity of spending. That's why today we've had private hospitals come up in the country compared to the way it was in the past. It shows as we grow, as our incomes grow as individuals, as we start to demand for better services, we actually call for opportunities for the private sector, opportunities in terms of investing in health, but that won't be done alone without government continuing to do a backbone. The areas where private sector wants the opportunities, but the people who stay there. So government has got to continue investing in those areas that have not yet potential for the private sector to be able to tap into resources from such areas. So a mix of the private sector and government investments is still required because the demand of the population in terms of the health care is changing in line with the change of their income.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm delighted to introduce the next panelist, the Minister of Health, Dr. Agnes. Now, given that the landscape is actually changing in terms of financing the sector, the ODA probably not going to raise any further, going to stay stagnant, or potentially even decrease. How do we make sure that any dollar that is raised is actually put to a good use, is effectively utilized? Now, Rwanda is the only country, the first country to introduce the result-based financing. And would you talk to us about why did you implement this approach and what we learn about this approach?
Thank you, Ronald. Good morning, everybody. I'm not so old. I started yesterday. What is important to know is that to make first question is how to make sure that each dollar, euro, franc is used with the maximum efficiency is to set up system. So, and this is very important. We need to have the right law, the right strategies, the right legal framework, and the right people, and especially strong accountability. Nobody is above the law. And in this framework, a strong auditora. We have auditors that are even stronger than the one of the World Bank and Global Fund, and create a system of accountability. This is what counts, because it starts from the planning. We have the money to do this. It's not only that we have to do that, what was planned, or have strong reason to dialogue and explain why not, but also the way and the process count. And for this is monitoring and evaluation and audit, and don't hesitate to go as far as put people in jail as much as necessary. For the second question, how we was the first country to introduce pay for performance is because it's in our culture. If you remember, Ronald, our mayors were signing performance contract with His Excellency before we do that for finance. And the mayor, the three first mayors, were receiving, of course, the photo with His Excellency, what is the best incentive ever. A cup, what is very good to put in your cupboard and say, it happened when I was mayor, but also a grant for the district. Meaning it was a competition with public incentive because it was in front of the population, with the radio, TV. All the mayors were exposed, the first one as well as the last one. And you come back in your district with extra money to do something you decide with your people to do. And it was working so well. Districts start to compete positively to be the first. And I remember we were all in the family behind the district of my mom, was Ramagana. In the beginning, there was the first. When they start to be the second and the third, and we met the mayor and say, hey, mayor, what happened? So even the citizens were making our mayor accountable. So when we brought that in the health sector, we were expecting the same. And it paid off. Because all of us here, especially my colleague from Rwanda, we are not at work for the salary. If we want, we can go elsewhere and have more. We were there because we are awarded by the result we have, by the change we put on the people. So the incentive and the recognition that you are good is so important in making people giving them the willingness to continue, to wake up every morning, to do it, to innovate more, to go. It's really engineer passion. And it has worked well. It brings also a rigor in evaluation. What are you measuring when you measure success, when you measure performance? So in the side of the policymakers and the program manager, it brings more rigor on where we want to go. Because when you evaluate people, especially with award behind, you need to have a very strong and strict way to argue on why we're good, why not, etc. So it brings more rigors. It's a true incentive. It brings retention. It push people to be innovative. And also it creates teamwork. Because, like me, I'm a minister. But what can I do in my office without a team? It's my team who is doing the work. What can my team do if the hospital are not working? What the hospital are doing if the sweeper is not good and don't welcome the customer at the gate of the hospital? So it creates also, the dividend of this approach is, we didn't finish to measure it.
Now, Minister, thank you very much. Most of the audience is actually, they're practitioners in the health sector and beyond. But maybe what we need to understand from you, Minister, how did you get the health sector, the providers, the service providers at the community level, how do you get them engaged, incentivized for them to do exactly what you're saying they've been doing? What has been the,
So the practicality of it has changed over time and has changed with the beneficiaries and the providers. If I take the example of the community health workers, in 2009, we negotiated a grant with the World Bank to start solid cooperative for the community health workers. And normally a community health worker is a volunteer. He accepts to serve, normally with a volunteer is not paid. But also we all agree that it's not sustainable. Especially in the beginning when we were rebuilding Rwanda, it was good because everybody was doing so much voluntary work. But now when we are taking a great breakfast like that, in a great view like that, we are not going to ask poor people to work for poor people for free. So at that time we thought about sustainability by creating the community health worker cooperatives. And we say, if you treat a malaria, the value of the doing it well is 100 francs, for example. 30 francs will be for you, 70 will create a business, and this business will provide profits so that in the future, when the development partner money decreases, the profit of that business will continue to pay your 30 francs. So this is an innovation.
Minister, do you think some of these are transferable to other countries, some of these experiences?
I think taking as a block and bring it elsewhere, not necessary, but the principle behind, meaning we did that with the community health workers. We create business at community level. We incentive them by bringing to them a better life and also a more powerful position in their community. So those principles are replicable. How to do that will depend on the story of the country, of what is important at community level in that culture and that country.
Minister, briefly, maybe if you could talk to us about the conference you had in March on the healthy financing, March this year. What are the key orientations and outcome of that conference? Briefly, if you could.
There are many. There are many. This conference, we call it with partners because of the decrease of funds coming in the health sector. While we want to provide more care with less. And it was time to to have a huge reflection where we go from that. How to keep and to continue to grow. And what came out, a series of very good recommendations. We need to work on them with the partners and see how we can implement that. On modality to raise more funds domestically with the financial institutions. The modality to provide care in more efficient way. Also the modality to run the health sector in a way that it's less costly. If you can see the revolution we did in the management of the health sector in 2011 by creating RBC and putting under a same roof maternal and child health, vaccination, mental health, HIV, TB, malaria, non-communicable disease. We didn't measure that, but what we see today is that already the funds of partners have reduced by 50%, but the quantity of care delivered on day-to-day basis continue to increase. So this type of even political management of institutions bring efficiencies. So how to bring efficiencies in management and also there was a huge component on pay for performance that we need to continue and to really linked with quality now. How to buy more quality year after year with the same amount. Meaning quality have to increase without an increase of the money. So this is a new philosophy we need to bring on the table, how to buy more quality every year with the same amount, and universal access. We had a lot of exchange on experience of different countries, how to increase access to care, leaving nobody out. What are the legal frameworks that are working, the relation with partners that are working, and many other things.
Okay, thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for those insights. Now, I think in this context, we need new partners. We need new actors to come on board, and actually we need private sector. Now I turn to Mr. Ade, the Group CEO of Ecobank, and is one of the most networked bank on the continent. In around 36 countries, I think, Ecobank has.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, with that wide network, Mr. Ade, and given the role, and actually the buzzword has been leverage. How do we leverage this? How do we leverage finance, resources? So what do you think Ecobank's leverage of capital has been to health sector? How do you think we can leverage more of Ecobank's capital and other, of course, financial institutions in the private sector to finance the health sector?
Well, thank you. Madam Minister, that was very inspiring statements you've made, and congratulations to you and the country. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for inviting us here to have a conversation. Yes, Ecobank, we're present in 36 countries in the continent. We do have outposts in Asia, in China, in Dubai, in UK, London, and in Paris. And we are purely an African institution. And the idea at the time we were formed was to try and transform the continent using private sector. So when we talk about private sector transformation, it's not just in terms of providing other services, but also health is a commodity that is consumed. It's a business in providing it. And if we take it that way, we believe there is something that can be better provided on a consistent basis. So when we talk about Ecobank, who are we? What can we leverage? Of course, we are present in all those locations. We can leverage ourselves. We have 20,000 employees. We can leverage them. But more importantly, we have partners that work with us, whether it's Global Fund, whether it's all other development financial institutions. What is important and what we do consistently is trying to look at problem situation and apply all the businesses to it, because it has to be, when we say something is bankable, it means that it has to be able to deliver and be fit for purpose. So when we take an example of the health posts in Rwanda here, we need to have 100 nurses. They're trying to set this up. We want to provide financing solution to that. Now, in providing a financing solution, we need to bring so many people together. So GSK will work with us. They provide a first loss. Our own EcoBank Foundation said for this to be profitable for the nurses, the interest cannot be at the current level. You need some subsidy. So we bring our foundation together to do that. But this needs to be monitored. So we bring the technology that we use for all our commercial ventures today to bring to bear on doing the monitoring. So all of those things, when you put them together, you will see that if we look at the health as just something that is we are helping, then you don't get there. But when you look at it as a business, bring all the core principles of management into delivering, then we can get it done. Leveraging then goes further. We've been talking about, do we have foreign exchange to be able to import? When you ask the question, the first answer is probably no. But if you look at the remittances that come into the African countries on an annual basis, they're actually large. So if we can tell people that these remittances that are coming, X percentage of this will be allocated to drugs that are coming to the country, then the pharmaceuticals will know that there is a market and they will be willing to supply. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and we said, well, you know, Rwanda is small. The population is just 10 million people. And I said, really? But Netherlands is big. The population is just 17 million people. Now, if you want to sell to Netherlands, nobody will say it is small. And the only reason why people say we're small is because we've not been able to demonstrate the capacity of the countries to be able to purchase. Health is a commodity. If we buy it properly, people will supply. When the mobile phone companies were coming to our countries, the first set of study that they did showed that in all these countries, you can never make money. But today, all the mobile phone companies are trying to find a way to come to the countries. If we can expose the fact that if out of 10 million, we get 1 million that contribute $1 a month, that's $12 million. That can actually support a lot of things. So the way we are looking at this is, look at, it's a commodity. It needs to be delivered as a business, and we will bring to bear everything we have ourselves in working with people to be able to get it done. Now, when we work with partners, we also tell them, if a lot of the money is spent on administrative expenses, rather than going to fix the health that it is meant for, then there will be donor fatigue. So when we work with them, we need to be efficient. The same way we tell companies you need to be efficient, they need to be efficient, and we put technology at their hand, and we allow the people that are donating money to get feedback to be able to monitor what is happening. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah,
you know
please,
how
Minister.
talkative I am. Rwanda is 11 million, but what people doesn't know is that at 1 day drive, we have 200 million population. Driving, not flying.
Which is bigger than Nigeria.
Absolutely.
Thank you
I
very
don't
much.
want to compete
Thank
in
you very
that.
much, Minister, for that. Mr. Ade, if I could follow up one question on the, is there any other thing that the banks could do besides providing capital, leveraging resources? Do you think there is any other thing that the banks could offer?
I think the banks could, both ourselves and the rest of the partners, it's not just capital, it's resources. We can bring a lot of people together. We can bring the insurance companies together. We can bring the manufacturing companies to try and come and see this is a big market. So all of that we can do, and we continue to do, because we have examples of things we've done in other places where we are really focusing on the issue. The health issue is not just about health. It's to create a society that can actually be not just people, but become consumers. And to become consumers, they need to be healthy so that they can work, so that they can earn a living. So we need to bring as many parties to the conversation to make sure that we can deliver results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, allow me to invite our next panelist, Mr. and Ambassador, in this case, Ambassador John Simon. You've been both in the private sector, in the diplomatic world, and you've seen some of these discussions. How do you think the mindset of private sector actually has evolved over the last decade in terms of actually investing in health sector? But because traditionally, I think health sector financing has been seen as a preserve of the public sector. So how has this evolution happened?
Well, thank you very much, and obviously you heard it from my neighbor here, the new approach that I think many businesses are taking to the health sector. First and foremost, I think there's a sense that if you don't invest in health, that's going to affect your employees, that's going to affect your customers, that's going to affect your markets. And therefore, a lot of businesses have transitioned from taking a view of health as something they do on the side, something they, well, we'll fund that clinic, we'll fund that hospital, we'll stay in its little box. And it's not really connected to the broader business that we're involved in, to saying, look, we need to make improvements in the markets that we're working in and see actual progress against health indicators and see that the diseases that affect our customers and our workers are actually put under control and ultimately eliminated, because that's a real cost to us. And so I think you see a lot of businesses who are trying to, I mean, the case of Merck putting $500 million into fighting to supporting maternal and child health globally is a case of businesses trying to find ways to actually move the needle on these issues, not just put together some sort of a billboard about what they do. But I think the other message we heard is that businesses are recognizing that health is an opportunity. If you look at Africa today, while the economies are growing, the IMF says a little bit slower now, but 5 to 7%. In fact, the health sector is growing at about 9%. And as countries become wealthier, more and more people put money into health. And therefore you see entrepreneurs who are starting new models of delivery of care, models that use, for instance, mobile technology and the internet to provide information to consumers so they can figure out where they can go to get the best services and how to get healthcare delivered or healthy advice delivered through their phones. You're seeing investors who are putting, the Investment Fund for Health in Africa just closed its second fund. First fund was 50 million euros, second fund is 150 million. Abraj has taken its experience in the health in Africa and has created a global health fund. And so more and more, the other point that my neighbor made about looking at health as a business, more and more people are recognizing it's a business both in terms of creating efficiencies, but also a business where there can be real opportunity to find returns.
Ambassador, you've been involved in quite a number of initiatives, but which are quite innovative in a way. And one of that is the Health Credit Initiative,
yes.
Exchange. And some people view it as probably similar to the traditional corporate social responsibility. How different are they?
I think it's fundamentally different. I think it starts with what the Honorable Minister was talking about paying for results. So fundamentally, the idea is that if what you care about is actually making a difference, not just creating something that is more for your advertising than for results, then why don't you create a mechanism that allows corporates to pay for results? And not just pay for results on their own, but align and partner with several others. So all the corporations, both the multinationals from outside a country and the local corporations from in the country, can support the same outcome that is identified ideally by the government as something that's fundamental to improving health in that country. And so you get the benefit of results-based performance. The funds do not flow unless the result is achieved. Creates the efficiency that was talked about before. You get the benefit of bringing lots of different parties together around a common goal, and you get a benefit of aligning the private and the public sector around national health priorities.
Do you think can it be deprecated outside the United States, or it's something that maybe the corporates in the US or?
Well, the focus of it is global health right now. The focus right now of the Health Credit Exchange is to identify opportunities to make a difference. And I think there's a term sheet for one of the projects that we're about to post on the exchange, a Partners in Health project in Malawi, where they've achieved success, and they want to expand, they want to scale up. And the idea is, rather than try and go sort of district by district and raise money for inputs, they want to be able to say, look, we've accomplished changes in outcomes. Let's ask a broad group of donors, a broad group of corporate philanthropists to pay for those outcomes, to say, look, these outcomes benefit the community and the world. If you're willing to pay us for achieving these results, we can use those funds to expand our impact and scale up. And that way you create this virtuous circle where the more successful you are, the more funding you get, the more funding you get, the more you can scale, and the more impact you can have.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think if I could turn to Patrick. Now, Patrick has been the head of private sector engagement department at the fund. And the fund, by the way, on the continent is very known for its tremendous support in fighting the three diseases. And if I could come to you, Patrick, having listened to Mr. Ade and Ambassador Simon about the role of private sector, we know the fund has been 95% financed by governments, by donors, the public sector particularly. How could we, and what should we do to make increasingly private sector actually contribute to the fund, or even go directly to the governments that the fund has been supporting?
Let me start by saying that it's great being back in Rwanda. Honorable Minister, I miss working with you. I used to work in Rwanda, so this feels like, you know, it takes me back a few years. I feel younger already. But to get back to your question, I think for the foreseeable future, ODA financing will be our main source of income. So for us, engaged in the private sector, it's not about replacing ODA financing. It's about increasing the resources available and making sure that those resources are best put to use. But at the same time, if you look at the broader financing landscape, I think it's also clear that there have been many changes over the last couple of years. And in most countries, I think you have, ODA inflows have been overtaken by other type of inflows, like foreign direct investments or remittances. And I think we can look at the numbers. In 1990, foreign direct investments into the developing world amounted to $34 billion, and ODA amounted to around $85 billion, more than double. Now that number has been completely inversed. We're looking at foreign direct investment around 700 billion, remittances at around 500 billion, and ODA at around 136 billion. So I think what we're going to see in the future is sort of a different use of ODA. We're going to look at much more sort of leverage, taking $1 and make it $2, and ODA will probably use to finance innovations and as risk capital. I think Rwanda is actually a really good example of this type of approach. The Honourable Minister referred to the performance-based financing of health facilities and communities, and also the community-based health insurance system. And these are all mechanisms and initiatives that were driven by Rwanda, that were conceived here, that were initiated here, but where some of the initial seed funding came from external sources like the Global Fund. But now these mechanisms are completely integrated into national health systems. And in the future, all these mechanisms will be fully paid for with domestic resources. So I think that's a really good use of ODA. But in this changing landscape, I think the role of the private sector will be increasingly important. And it's about, of course, mobilizing more resources, but also about tapping into the ingenuity and innovation of the private sector. And that's really why we're happy to partner with Ecobank, for example. We're allowed to that allows us to tap into some of the best banks some of the best brains in banking, and apply that skill to develop capacity of some of the implementers we're working with. At the same time, I think it's a partnership that works both ways. It also allows Ecobank to get a better understanding of some of the services that we need in terms of foreign exchange, in terms of mobile banking and so on, and the same thing with the implementers, and that allows Ecobank to tailor their services. So I know that was a long-winded answer to saying, yes, the role of the private sector is important.
Patrick, thank you very much. In the situation of where you have fewer resources, and you want to do more, so you need to be creative and actually efficient. So what mechanisms are you thinking about that are going to make more results, still achieve more results, but with fewer resources that is at our disposal? What are you thinking around that?
I think there are a number of mechanisms, and there's no single sort of panacea type of solution. It ranges from everything from increased resources at the country level to increased resources at the Global Fund. But we are also looking at some of the newer mechanisms, like, for example, we're trying to establish private sector-driven health funds in some of the countries, we're looking at debt swaps, we're looking at blended financing products. So if you take the example of India, for example, we've been working with Tata Trust to set up an India health fund. This is a health fund that will be financed by high net worth individuals and the private sector. It already counts on a seed contribution from Tata Trust of 15 million, but the ambition is to develop this fund to at least $150 million to fight infectious diseases in India. But it's not only about resources, it's also about sort of infusing innovation into the Indian health response and really engage the corporate sector to support India as it sort of as it sort of develops on, or as it continues on its development trajectory. And we see the same models being sort of applied in other countries as well, like Indonesia, where we had a contribution of $65 million from an Indonesian businessman, and then he mobilized an additional $40 million from different businessmen, and now we have a $100 million fund to fight infectious diseases in Indonesia. In terms of debt swaps, we have a debt to health initiative, that's what we call it. And it's a pretty simple proposition that combines debt reduction with increased funding in health. So the way it works is that the creditor relinquishes its right to repayment of parts of a loan on the condition that the debtor country invests some of that money into health programs. So it's really a pretty simple proposition, but we've already swapped around $170 million for health financing, and we have a pretty healthy pipeline as well. And lastly, I should say something about blended financing. I think this goes back to something that Adam mentioned around his work, the Ecobank's work here with the nurses, where you mix capital from the foundation and then also from ordinary capital resources to create more favorable conditions. Blended financing is essentially the strategic combination of grants on one hand and loans on the other hand to create bigger financing packages. We haven't been able to use or to leverage Global Fund funding to fully blend ourselves, but what we have done is to create bundle financing, where we create sort of bigger health financing packages by looking at Global Fund financing and other type of financing streams from, for example, development banks, from the Gates Foundation, and so on. And we're trying this approach in a few countries, like in Senegal and Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Minister, in the context of, again, very limited resources, but we want more results, what do you think ICT, the role of ICT in this digital era, what can we expect that the role of ICT would be in making sure that we track wherever we put our dollar in health sector financing and make sure that the results we want to see are actually out there? So what has been your experience in the use of ICT?
Our experience in ICT is, we like it. First of all, it was a huge investment. And you know how even His Excellency was talking about when he started early 2000 to say, I want ICT to cover here. When we had so many big issues, nobody was understanding it. Even me, I was saying, oh my God, I even don't know what it is. I didn't get an email address at that time and whatever. But look where we are now. Thanks to that, we have a timely report for everything in the health sector, using internet, and no longer going there, have the report, or having it 2 months later, reacting too late. We can manage epidemic. We can also do e-banking, paying for your health insurance. You know what is the temptation when you don't have more than $2 a day, and when you just receive the money of your neighbor. You are going to banking for yourself during 2 or 3 days so you have some profit without having bad intention, but mobile money, save the health insurance, the community health workers project. We also coordinate and use it for knowing where the people are at work and where we need the more nurses. We also use it coupled to GIS to see where we need to post the next health post to serve best the population. So for infrastructure, reporting, monitoring and evaluation, assure that things are really done. for also rapid SMS, follow up the pregnant woman, calling on time health ambulances. Now we want to know where our ambulances are, where the need are. We would like to have all our beds in hospital monitored, so we know that even if this patient should go in that hospital, we better send there because we have a specialist and beds. So saving life and using ICT in 100 ways, it's very useful.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now, Mr. Ade, is there anything we've not addressed in this conversation that you think is really critical when you talk about innovative financing to health sector?
I think we've covered many things, but the minister corrected me when I said Rwanda is 11 million people. That Rwanda is a dead drive to 200 million people. And you can extend that to sub-Saharan Africa, it's 1 billion people. The big idea has to be, how can we start pulling together to buy medicine? How can we demonstrate that this market is big enough for people to be able to create industries here so that they can supply at a much lower cost because it's no longer being transported over bad places. And that is where both private sectors and governments needs to understand that if we all pull together, we talk leveraging, we need to leverage our population and our buying power to now start demanding the location of some of the farms to produce near to us as much as is possible. If 200 million is within a day drive, definitely for 200 million people, we can actually have some manufacturing hubs that is closer here. It creates jobs for people. It allows all the kids that are getting out of school now to start finding work to do, allow the universities to start doing better research, and allow the cost of production to come down. And maybe if we do it as many as we can do here, the question of foreign exchange for the purpose of import will actually start going down. And therefore, the money we're using for the purpose of buying, if we can come to the banks and we say, okay, over the next 10 years, this is how much we're going to buy. Across these 200 million, if I just stay with the 200 million, we want you people in the banking community to give us 70% of the money that is going to come, we're going to use for the next 10 years. Perhaps that can actually solve some of the problems in creating factories and farms here to actually produce. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Permanent Secretary, we know we've been juggling with the financing different sectors, of course, among them the health sector. And you find agriculture needs 20% of the budget. Health needs maybe 12 to 15%. Energy will need more than, education will need. If you add, actually have 150% of your budget. So how do you, increasingly, of course, looking at domestic resource mobilization, how are you prioritizing health sector financing from domestic resources?
Thank you, Ronald. Like you said, there are competing factors to do with public sector finance or public sector budgets, where you need money for health, education, infrastructure, and the rest. But the interesting thing is in Rwanda, what we've done is under the strategic plan, the 3-year strategic plan, which is the EDPRS, we've kind of put everything together in terms of the key sectors or the components of the strategic plan, looks at each and every sector and make sure that if you are to finance, for example, health, we've got to make sure that you have road network in place, we have electricity in place, we have schools. So it's a combination of all the sectors of the economy that have got to go hand in hand if you're financing for any single year. Before you think of setting up a new healthcare or hospital in place X, the first question that goes through members of the cabinet is, do you have their road? Do you have their electricity? Do you have a nearby school that people who be working in the hospital or the nearby people are actually able to access all those? So now you come now to the distribution. The distribution determined through, we are informed by the strategic plan, first of all. And again, you look at the plans of each and every sector at the start of the fiscal year and say, if we are to finance, the Ministry of Health needs about, let's say, 10 billion for infrastructure development in this year. But we need to actually put there 10 billion, or we need to put there 3 billion now and distribute more to the road, to electricity, in that by the time they finish the construction, they have been able to get all these other components that come from these other sectors, make sure that actually when this hospital is up and running, it makes sense for the community. Instead of having a structure that has no electricity, has no supply of water, has no road network that will actually not allow people to access the hospital, not allow even the doctors to be able to actually have a conducive environment where they would be staying to be able to serve people. So it's a combination of looking at all these sectors and how they actually fit into one another. Because investment we'll be doing in agriculture or investment we'll be doing in infrastructure, we come in to leverage what we've actually invested in health. And in the end, it becomes a win-win. It's not going to be a competition for this sector and the other sector, but they all fit into one another, and we're able to distribute resources in a much easier way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kare. Ambassador, before I turn to the audience for any comments, questions following the discussion, looking at the net worth individuals, the philanthropy, the corporates, how do you think in this mode of looking at how do we attract more funding and all, what do you think should be the framework? How do we entice them? Because there are people out there who are willing to support, who are willing to contribute, but maybe a framework isn't that clear to them. What would you say?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'd say we need to broaden the aperture not just to the large corporates, not just to the high net worth individuals, but also to the local businesses, to consumers. So I think, there are a lot of businesses that are active, that are growing, that want to start to give back to their community, but they may not be as big as a Fortune 500 business and therefore don't have the wherewithal to set up their own corporate foundation or set up an infrastructure to be able to deliver their own programs. And what the Health Credit Exchange allows people to do is to buy into the outcomes of a program that's already in existence and help that program scale up. So they can say, look, if I really care about maternal and child health, and here's a program that's achieving results, and I really only want to use my funds if the results are achieved. I don't have enough capital to put money into things where there's a risk that things won't work out. I can say, if you're able to lower maternal mortality rate by X, then my funds are released. And if not, they would go somewhere else. And you can do that for 1 million women, or you could do it for 1,000 or 100. And what you can do is not only allow small businesses to do this, as well as large corporates, not only allow multinationals as well as local companies, but ultimately allow the consumers of these businesses to buy in the same way that some businesses allow you to offset your carbon footprint by buying voluntary carbon credits. You can offset, you can contribute to the wherewithal of others as you purchase, say, health insurance for yourself or health commodities for yourself by buying into that business's program on the Health Credit Exchange.
Thank you very much, Mr. Now, the audience, do you have any follow-up questions to the conversation? Comments over here?
I'm with a little software company called SAP, which I believe the Global Fund is a little familiar with. I was very pleased to hear 3 different viewpoints. First, I heard the Honorable Minister say that health is a public good. Then I heard the CEO of EcoBank say that health is a business. And lastly, I heard Patrick say that philanthropists around the world are getting together to fund this challenge that we are facing. I want to touch on 2 other points. The SADC health ministers, who obviously we are in touch with on a regular basis, are looking to put together a SADC Health Trust, which the Global Fund is actually involved with. And we see that as one of the critical areas where all 3 of these players, the philanthropists, the private sector, and government can come together to put in place a substantial amount of funding to address these type of challenges. The other point is, as SAP, we're working with the Global Fund to assist with the identification of transportation of drugs and goods. And we've created a dashboard, which we're hoping to display at the AIDS conference that's coming up in South Africa in Durban. And I'm hoping to see many of you there. Last but not least, I love what you said about technology, Minister, and the whole idea of innovation and the way that the Rwandan government has worked towards these goals that you've set in place. If something is not measured, it's very difficult to determine what success is about. Ultimately, this is the one industry when you get it wrong, people die. People die when you get it wrong. So it's very important, and Minister, your portfolio, it cannot be overemphasized. A decade is not enough to do everything to put a nation on fast track. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think they are powerful thoughts. Make no mistake.
Jamie Drummond, co-founder of One. Are there any legislative fixes or tweaks to policy from G7 or others that would help and facilitate these kinds of innovative financing mechanisms? Or is this all, between individual governments and banks and investors? Or is there something that actually would help take these to scale that groups like ours could do public policy advocacy on internationally? Thank you.
Paul Ambasinga from the Rwanda Biomedical Center. We've been talking about domestic resource mobilization and different means to bring more to the health sector. But one thing that in most African countries, not particularly in these countries, that we don't see how much money that the government allocate to health, but which at the end of the day is not used for health. That the budget execution through government systems is quite very low, around 40 to 50% in some countries, and sometimes huge inefficiencies toward the end of the fiscal year when people need just to spend the money. They just spend the money to do anything, which is not contributing to the impact. So it's great to see the public sector and the private sector here, and we see how the private sector do leverage and really put systems in place to improve management and accountability. Is there any experience that Rwanda can share or the private sector can share on how even to maximize the resources that government are putting in place?
I'm here, the Permanent Secretary and the Minister of Health. So it has been always discussed that the public-private dialogue was always becoming an issue. And because of different ways of thinking, one thing about social entrepreneurship, as the former colleague said, health as a public good and a commodity to the people. And then also the private may be going to the far end and talking about the profit and so forth. And the dialogue has been always something that people said, we need to improve the dialogue between the private and the public. So I want just to get a sense of what you think is the level we are at now. When you look at the government of Rwanda, the public sector, especially the health sector, how is it easy to access, the public people and discuss about, partnering in terms of funding health? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We are coming back to the panel with the closing remarks, but addressing the questions that have been addressed to you. If I may begin with Patrick. A minute for closing this session. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I will try to address a few of the questions, perhaps. Maybe just to start again about the size of Rwanda, the 11 million, 200 million. It makes me a bit worried about my own country of 9 million people. So I don't know about the future of Sweden, actually, how that will go. But anyway, recognizing a bit what the gentleman from SAP mentioned, I think we have a great partnership with SAP. And you were also talking about the SADC Trust Fund. And I think that's an excellent example of a fantastic idea, but it's difficult. And coming up with these new mechanisms, new structures that involve, in the case of SADC, 9, 10 countries, the private sector, civil society, and then trying to agree on what to do, how to distribute the funding and so on, that will take time. But I think that the rewards will be immense once you get there. But I think that is one of the lessons that we have learned, is that these mechanisms, they take some time, they take some patience, and it's really, in the end of the day, it's about aligning, incentives, it's about aligning risks, and it's about aligning objectives of all these different stakeholders. And I think in the end of the day, we need to get there. That's really what I think what I have, Ronald.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Ambassador?
Sure. I mean, building on what Patrick said, you know, all these new ideas, they're great on paper, but actually implementing them requires a significant amount of transaction cost. And for those transaction costs to be worthwhile, they have to get to scale. So really what's fundamental to make a lot of these initiatives that we're talking about work is to have a sponsor at the outset who's got the wherewithal to take the long-term view and stick with these initiatives through the inevitable ups and downs until they're able to achieve that scale where those transaction costs become a relatively small percentage of the overall funds that are mobilized and not this big hurdle that you have to get over to begin to realize results. Going to Jamie's question on what the public policy can actually do to facilitate these types of initiatives. There's a new law in India that requires 2% of corporate profits to be put into social projects. And one thing to think about is can some of these initiatives, for instance, if you buy credits on the Health Credit Exchange to support various programs, can those count towards a set-aside like that the Indian government has put in place? It's not that different from the Community Reinvestment Act that was done in the United States, where banks were given credit for funds that they put into projects that had an impact on underserved communities. And so I think in terms of utilizing public policy, not to coerce the private sector into these initiatives, but to incentivize, I think has tremendous possibility. And the last point I'd make is just this concept of blended capital that we've been talking about quite a bit. I think the opportunities, you know, in a world of somewhat restricted public and donor funding, but really massive amounts of private sector funding that's looking for a place to achieve a return. I mean, $100 trillion out there in assets under management that is finding very difficult to get returns in the traditional instruments that exist. I think creatively using the donor financing to buy down the risk and to create opportunities in markets that many of these investors and institutions haven't thought of before, such as healthcare in Africa, creates a real opportunity to get several multiples of the resources we have now into place to address these types of problems.
Thank you, Ambassador. Piers, what will be your closing remarks on this?
Thank you, Ronald. I think the major one is about innovation. Innovation in the way we do business as government, innovation in the way we deliver, innovation in the way we account for resources that have been budgeted for and actually used. And again, us being able to innovate in the way we collect resources from the domestic market, be it at central level or district level, because I keep telling people hospitals are not for the means of health. They belong to the district. They serve everyone in a given country. So us being able to raise more resources at district level and making sure that also districts are able to contribute to the financing of the health sector is important. And again, looking at Rwanda based on its location, being able to finance in form of PPP, because we have a huge market, because we serve the population in Rwanda and you serve all the neighboring countries. If you're from Uganda, Congo, Burundi, it's much nearer to reach a referral hospital in Rwanda compared to where you can reach a referral hospital in your motherland. And if we improve through innovation in the way we serve people, we'll be able actually to bring more resources to our hospitals. And that is going to attract the private sector. Private sector I'm talking about is the banks. If banks see it as a bankable project, they're going to come on board, and then the private practitioners in the health sector will also be able to relocate in Rwanda. I think we've seen some of them come on board. And that, when that happens, they subsidize what government puts into the health sector. So finally, we need to embrace the IT like was talked about by the minister, because it touches on each and every component up to the accounting and reporting. We can use the same amount of money like we've used in the past 3 years, but achieve more if actually we are able to have proper accountability in place up to the health centers, and then be able to reach more people than we're able to reach in the past years. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Ade, briefly, what will be your closing remarks?
Thank you. I'll just respond to some of the comments around budget execution, or whether the money is we spend towards the end of the period. In the private sector, you have a budget, you have an outcome. We measure people on the basis of outcome. And not just on the basis of amount of money that you spend, but on the basis of the outcome. And some of those outcome-based management are things that the minister was talking about. And I think Rwanda is not in one of the places where people rush to spend, especially when you have those outcome-based. The question about public-private partnership in terms of dialogue, what I've seen in Rwanda, there are a lot of conversation that is going on between the private sector, and there is access to the various ministries, especially the Ministry of Health. But across board, we have to create a situation in which there is an understanding that for this to be sustainable over a long term, the participation by the citizenry in being ready to pay for the health, not in terms of paying at the point of need, but being able to contribute in terms of insurance that ensures that that facility is available when you need it. We're not asking people to pay at the point you want to have a child delivery, but allowing people to understand for this to be sustainable over a long term, the citizenry have to be ready to participate. It's always good for donor money to leverage and create situations where problems can be solved, but they themselves would not be the long-term sustainable way of being able to maintain healthcare in our countries. In my country, from Queen Victoria to 1999, we have 130,000 phone lines. Within that time and now, we have 130 million mobile phone lines because it's gone to the private sector. When it stays only in the public sector, then we are doing allocation of money. So if there's anything I want to leave people with here, is that the donor money will be helpful, the government money will be helpful, but the rest of the citizenry has to see health as a commodity that we all consume, and we should be ready to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ade. Honourable Minister, your closing remarks.
So, there is a lot of good ideas here. And first of all, I want to remind each and everyone that we are managing the public sector as a private sector. I'm tasked to manage the portfolio of the health as I manage mine on home, meaning making it much saving for me to go on holidays, that's home, but for the government, do enough, giving enough outcome and do enough saving to do something else with this money, to do more health for the same money. So public good, business, philanthropy, yes, we are all entrepreneurs. And this is what is special in Rwanda. If you remember, the journal Fortune have said, Rwanda is like a big business with a CEO called Kagame. Huh? We are tasked to be CEO where we are. And we are measured out of outcome and result-based management. Ask these gentlemen and our PS there, the two PSs, every quarter we have to give a report on execution on budget. And when we are executing less than 80%, oh la la, the Prime Minister calls us and say, hey guys, what happened here? You better accelerate. Isn't it?
That's true.
Every quarter we are not around the coffee, around red, green, and yellow. So that means the way we manage the country explains the outcomes of Rwanda, because it's outcome-based, and we have to be efficient In collection of money, even in the health sector, because each hospital is a little factory for health, selling health, collecting money, recycle money inside the hospital for continuing to provide better health. So, collection of money, using of money, monitoring of the money, all this is business oriented. So, and for this we have innovation that are not global innovation. We go for the PPP, I hear about the PPP dialogue. In Rwanda, it's not contradicting because we run the health sector and 30% of our health facilities don't belong to the government. But ask the PS, when he signed for salaries of some staff, we don't know if it belongs to an NGO, if it belongs to the government or to the churches. They are all staff that run their portion on public good basis. So social entrepreneurship is everywhere. We just make sure, as P.S. Caleb said, that the basis of our strategies and policy are human development. And for this, that's the reason why we are so privileged in the health sector. We are listened to proactively. Each and everyone want a healthy citizen multiplied by 11 million. Soon maybe 200 million, because look what we have done for the refugee camp. It's better here than elsewhere. Why? Because we value human. And not only Rwandan. So, PPP, but we go in Rwanda to PPCP, using the community, public-private community partnership, and some of our biggest hospitals are based on that. We do a MOU with some churches for the hospital, like now, next year, the government is going to build a hospital for the churches, and we'll have an MOU, because in that place, the churches provide health, and it's better for us to build it in partnership with the church than to go alone, or to let the church not being able to do that. So the second point is, the third point is about policy advocacy. I think he went, but there is a lot to do in that. You need to create good global policy enough to guarantee the production of the private sector. When the private sector produce fake drugs, it's a private sector. Private sector are not seen. There are some who are better, we should be more strong and put some of them where they belong, in jail. And it's not because they are private sector that they should be protected. And if you look at the global framework and the laws to protect countries, what you do in my country, we can control. What we buy from countries that are so far, remember the fake bed nets we had. We buy for 18 million. Global Fund buy even for more. Nobody went against those people because they are protected by a vacuum globally. So there is a lot of work to do like in that, because it's a lot of money that we all lose. So there is a lot of things to do to create a good legal framework, to incentivize good private sector, to incentivize quality and ethics. Lastly, I disagree that innovation is difficult. If you find it difficult, come and implement it in Rwanda. It's a warm welcome, because what we have done over 22 years, you all know where we come from. What we have done is because innovation is our motto. And because we decide that we are going to simplify all those things and not to be mystified by being scared to implement it. Alignment of risk incentive and those are things are good. And I have to tell you, when you have created the national legal framework for accountability and responsibility, when you have teach institutions to work together, because as P.S. Caleb say, we may decide that for the health sector, it's better to build that road for people to have access to that hospital than to create a new hospital. That's how we sit with district together every year to see what to do together with the money. So when you have institutions work together, framework of accountability, innovation is really like playing Lego when you have 5 years old. In one word, I hope that I will never hear again in any conferences that is difficult, except if we have failed to make it in Rwanda.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, Minister. If I heard correctly, innovate, engage, and sustain.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Wouldn't have wished a better panel than this one. Please join me to thank them for their time.